Hey, good evening. Thanks for joining us for Everything Matters. I like to start off our show just to help you understand why we call it Everything Matters and kind of how we've landed at that. I grew up in a pastor's home and very spiritual kind of environment. And for me, most of my life, everything was built around the spiritual. And that was good. I think there's a lot of great things, reading the Bible, praying, those kinds of things was good for me. But as I got older, as I started to experience more of life, I realized there's more to life than just the spiritual. There's also the practical and the emotional. And as I got older, became a pastor myself and started serving in ministry, I realized how God would weave in and out of all these different experiences, from art to music to politics to faith to all these different kinds of things. And the spiritual elements of that, the practical elements, the emotional elements, all rolled into that whole entire experience. So that's why the name Everything Matters. So thanks for joining us tonight. We are going to be talking about politics and faith and having a great conversation. So glad that you're here. Invite some other friends. Text them and say, come join the conversation. I think we're going to have a great show tonight. So I want to just introduce some of these guys. My friend Mark Lehman over here. And we're going to let him introduce himself in a little bit. And my friend Brian Rawson. And so I just want to kind of lay the groundwork a little bit for this discussion. Because when we say politics, it could be all over the place. And you guys have served for a long time in the public services. You and I talk about it a lot. Mm-hmm. But I want to just kind of give a little bit of a premise that can maybe help us. And I'd love for you guys to both share a little bit of your history and kind of some of your experience, which will help shape the conversation. But I had this idea, and I put it in the promo, that growing up, I was in a band called Ivory Fire, total 90s rock band. And I thought this thing was the greatest thing ever. And we had stickers, and I would slap the stickers on my guitar cases, on drum cases, on everything I could. And then it became I would slap them on the drive-up window at wherever it was at, or people's cars, whatever else. That was really, really irreverent. But there was a sense of me that was okay, I'm putting my sticker on everything. And I kind of had this idea, this kind of wrestling about this idea that. And I've noticed this as I've grown up, and especially being a pastor and then dealing with politics, and obviously during that time when politics are pretty heated and intense, is this idea that for me, Jesus has a sticker, and sometimes we would take the Jesus sticker and slap it on our own political ideology or our political party or whatever else. So we do that with lots of different things. So that's been kind of some of the premise for me that I'd like us to hop into. And there's all sorts of tentacles about that. But before we do that, I think to frame the conversation out, Mark, could you just tell us a little bit about your history? I think you told me you started in the political realm in 1984.
I did.
Just tell us a little bit about your journey and kind of some of your experience, what you've done.
Sure. I'm a reformed campaign manager and political consultant, then eased into the public policy side of things, both in Washington, D.C. and Austin, in the state capitol in Austin. But, nobody goes into that field as planned out. They don't go to college to study campaign work or how to do it.
Yeah.
I backdoored into it as a result of starting a new job in 1984 and showed up, and there were padlocks on the door because of some tax issues they had. So the only option I had was a friend running for Congress, and started to manage his campaign.
Wow.
That led me to Washington. I didn't expect him to win, but he did.
That was pretty cool. So the majority of your time has been in Washington and in the state capitol too. Can you tell me a little bit about some of your what you did at state capitol particularly? Because I think you worked in kind of both sides. I mean, even party-wise, you worked with both groups, right?
That was a time when you could work for Democrats and Republicans. I was very proud of it.
Yeah.
But, I think things have become so polarized now, you cannot do that. But I think Texas is a great state, and no matter what you hear or see, what comes out of the state capitol, and, of course, I'm on Brian's turf because he was feared and revered when I started there. But
surely you jest.
I know I do
Boy,
not.
this thing is getting
There were two
started right
people
on.
at the Texas Capitol when I
Feared
started.
and revered, our urban ministry
feared. One of
pastor.
them was Bob Bullock, and the other one was Brian Rawson.
That's your mentor, right?
Yeah, he could he could, for lack of a better word, screw with somebody's budget faster than anybody I know. But
And that's the nicest thing you could say
Yeah.
about what he did to the budget. Yeah.
No, I'm talking about you.
You're right.
But, yes, I know. Believe me, I felt it. When I got to the Texas Capitol, after working constant gridlock in Washington, D.C., I loved every second of it.
Really?
I think it was a place where Republicans and Democrats run under their label, and it's changed a little bit recently. But they get into the committee meetings and discuss the issues and just do what's right for Texas.
Wow.
So the majority of my time was spent in the Texas Capitol, and not as a campaign consultant or campaign worker, but as a public policy wonk. And I'll never trade anything for that.
Wow.
Amen.
I bet you got some stories, and I can't wait to hear some of them tonight.
I don't think I can tell them.
You can't. We're going to make
few
you
of
tell them. So, Brian, you and I spent a lot of time together working in ministry now, but then you had a long career working, and what you've always referred to as public service.
Amen.
And I think you have represented that well. But tell us a little bit of your resume and your history too, where some of that comes from.
Yeah.
At the state building.
Well, Aaron, thanks for the question and thanks for the invite today. And, I told Carol before I came over tonight, my beautiful bride, I hate talking politics in public, and I haven't done it in many years.
I agree.
But, when an Aaron Foor and a Mark Lehman invite me to come chat with them about politics,
Right.
I'll do it.
That's good. I
So
appreciate it.
I really do appreciate the invite. I came to state government in 1986, and I'll give you the bumper sticker version, Aaron and Mark, which is, I had always felt a calling to serve. And in this day and age, especially in government, who has a calling to serve in government? Well, back in those days,
They
and
all
I
do.
guess, Mark, you were probably out of the same ilk. I was a little young to follow the JFK call. Ask not what your country can do for you, what you can do for your country. But Bob Bullock. So Mark was friends with Bob Bullock, and by the way, we've had some great comparative Bob
Real
Bullock
quick
stories.
for us
Yes.
non-Texans,
Yes.
and I mean that in the
I'll do
sense
it.
that I haven't
I'll
been
do
here
it.
for a long time. We might have somebody goes, Bob Bullock, there's a
Yes.
museum, but what's the history there?
Well, so Google it first because it'd take me hours to go through his resume. But he was one of the great Texan politicians. Tough guy, but he was lieutenant governor for the state. And in fact, the museum right down the street here is named after him, the State of Texas Bob Bullock Museum. Mark could give you some amazing stories. Well, I'll tell you about Bob Bullock.
And none that I can repeat.
And very, very little you can repeat. Great leader. A lot of folks called him the kingmaker. I mean, while he was a Democrat during most of his term, in fact, all of it, he pretty much raised George W. Bush. So he was one of these guys who was absolutely willing to go to both sides of the aisle. But I go back to him. He had a great quote right after I started in government service, and to this day it really drives me. And I'm going to read it to you real quick. Bob Bullock said, government and politics working together working together is the art of the possible. And it's amazing what can be done for the people of Texas when nobody worries who gets the credit.
So true.
And so that was sort of Lieutenant Governor Bullock's call to arms, that if we do it right, and by the way, it's been a long time since we've done it right, the way that he prescribed, when you see politics and government serving the people together, truly serving the people together in a bipartisan way, and some of us have to have long-term memories to remember that. It truly is amazing what can be done for the citizens of the state. So long story short, Aaron, I guess I've already taken too much time.
No, it's good. You're my local
yeah,
historian.
amen,
I mean, I tell
amen.
people this all the time. That Brian is like,
Yeah, because you and I are Californians.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we have been for 20
my
I was
assimilation to
26 years.
Texas has come through Brian Rawson.
Right.
He goes,
Yeah.
you need to go here, you need to go to there,
Right.
you need to take this tour, you need to go to this. So, I feel like it's helped me soak up so much
Sure.
the beautiful history
Well,
of Texas.
and my role in Texas government as a public official was on the executive branch side.
Right.
So everybody understands the difference between the judicial, the legislative, and the executive. We won't get into that, but I was on the executive side. So I ran agencies. I was in senior leadership for agencies for almost 30 years. And interestingly, I worked with guys like Mark on the legislative side to quite honestly, get things done. The policymakers,
Right.
the folks that were influencing that policy. But my role typically was non-political because it was an executive branch. Not to insinuate that we didn't get involved in political, because we worked
Right.
for elected officials, but we were here to execute policy.
You're the nuts
so
and bolts.
this is a good mix. I
Yeah,
think,
the
for you
nuts and
tonight.
bolts
Yeah.
was the policies were
Yeah.
right for sure.
Yeah.
I will add one real quick story on Brian. The first time I ever heard prayer mentioned, but as you know, there are prayer groups all over the Capitol, Republicans, Democrats, elected
But-
officials, staffers.
What does that mean, prayer groups?
Well, they just get together and pray in the morning.
Didn't matter what side of the aisle.
No, not at all, not at all. But I was in where all the power happens. By the way, the lieutenant governor is the most powerful job in the state. People think it's a governor, but thanks to Bob Bullock, he took a very powerful position and made it a sort of a fiefdom. But he never abused that power. Ever. But I was in Senate Finance, which is a very ominous place, and another statewide elected official was talking, and the chairman of the committee, who was kind of a jerk, said, "Well, are you sure you can get this all done before the end of the session, which is only 2 weeks away?" And she said, probably let her name away. I said, she says, "No, I can't, but I know a guy named Brian Rawson who will." And the chairman of this committee said, "Well, maybe we all better say a prayer for Brian Rawson." So that was my first introduction to him.
Amen. Good
That
stuff.
is
Mark.
awesome.
Good
That is
stuff.
awesome. I mean, I've talked with both of you, and I love hearing some of the stories. But I'd love to just kind of dig in this a little bit. What for both of you? Because I'm sure you have this. But what's been your biggest achievement in working in government? Whether it is together with other people or some sort of policy or thing that you were able to write or campaign you're on. I'd love to hear from your perspective. What was like, if you look back on 84, 86, you guys started serving, how long that is, but what's your biggest thing that you would say is like, that's my deal?
Well, since you can Google it and figure it out, first of all, I'm very proud of the fact that I was able to have my name on some very high-profile Democrat and Republican candidates. I chose them because I really believed in what they were doing, and I won't say their names, but they were great for the state, and I was very honored to help them get elected. And get elected without compromising themselves, without compromising their political beliefs, and being very, very honest with the voters.
Right.
I think they made a big difference in the state, and I'm very honored to have done that.
Mark, you shared earlier that without, again, naming names or anything, you voted today. You want to share how you voted? Not names.
Sure. No.
Because it's
First
odd
of
that
all-
you're describing your political career the way you are and the way you voted.
Well, I'll add to that. First of all, which we may get into or not, but I did supervise elections in Russia and Latvia and
Yeah.
a little bit in South Africa for a while when democracies were coming
Forming,
into
right?
power.
Yeah.
Has this guy got it going on?
I know, that's crazy.
Really?
Well, you're going to ask me what my
Do you-
biggest mistake is, and I will tell you
Yeah.
my biggest mistake got me sent to Siberia, but I believe that's another story, which we may get to tonight. But I voted
Mark,
today.
You got the Siberia assignment, dude.
But I voted today, and I take voting very seriously, having worked with people who were voting for the first time in 40 and 50 years and how seriously they took it. But so for the last couple of weeks, I've been looking at how I'm going to vote. And I had 25 choices on the ballot. I voted in 16 races because I'm one of those that really believes. As Brian knows, we've gotten a lot of trouble with famous names on the ballot who should not have been on the ballot, like our treasurer, the state treasurer for Texas for a long time was a guy named Jesse James, who had like a fourth grade education.
Hey, I don't
vote for
know.
it?
JT James, that one
Right.
looks good.
But I took voting very seriously, and when I finished, and I'm always very proud of my vote, and I thought, in this unique circumstance, I'm probably the most hated man in America, because of the 16 candidates I voted for, and I went and added them up, I voted for 8 Republicans and 8 Democrats. And right now, you just can't be in that situation where you're either one or the other. But that was
used to be that used to be a badge of honor, right?
Oh yeah.
Show that you have integrity if you could.
Because she asked your question about your achievement, and you're saying, I serve both parties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud of my votes, and I researched those, but you can't announce it. Well, I voted for her, I voted for him. Your house is going to get egged right now.
Yeah. That's rough. That's crazy. I want to dig in that a little bit more, but I'd love to hear from you, thinking back on your career. What was the one thing you would go, you've told me so many stories about Bob Bullock, which has been like, literally every time you tell me some quote from him, I see why he was such an influential guy, because you get inspired by those, like the quote you read before. I'm like, like let's do it, you know. But tell me some of the like things you look back on your career.
and really kind of coming from a different angle of Mark. So being in the executive branch and ran a state agency or two, mine were really more, what I'd consider sort of my accomplishments. By the way, there's probably a lot of people in Texas who might suggest that I had no accomplishments. If you read the newspaper.
That's the political side of
Let's
what
say
you had
if
to
you
deal
read
with,
the
right?
newspaper between 2008 maybe and 2010. I'm just sort of joking. But as an executive agency head, implementing the things that we received from Mark's side of the house, the legislative side of the house, really was probably some of the biggest accomplishments. One that comes to mind back in probably 2006 to 2010 was the implementation, and this is a great project. It had intrigue and drama, politics. I mean, it had all the things for a good story and lots of money. But it was essentially transforming the way Texas does business across all of its executive branch agencies, probably over 100 executive branch agencies, through the deployment of technology.
Right.
So technology and processes and people, big contracts, just a very complicated and complex mechanism to ultimately transform government to better serve citizens. We were successful with some, unsuccessful with others, but I think the legacy of some of that work today has really been the catalyst to transform government. So I'd say that's probably my biggest accomplishment. As
That was all just a
head.
big preparation for you to become the
Absolutely.
urban ministry pastor
There's no
at
doubt.
Riverbend Church,
There
because
is
that's
no
who uses
doubt.
that like crazy.
But that was a huge accomplishment, because one of the things, how bad it was the Texas Department of Criminal Justice men's facilities, the Huntsville facility, could not and did not know how to communicate with the women's facilities or the Texas Youth Commission. And so we had criminals flying all over the state. So why didn't you tell us he raped this person? Or why didn't you tell us she threatened her victims? But they couldn't communicate. And what you did, and people really did kind of hate him for it. I mean, it was the elected officials didn't want to take the blame for it, so they blamed it on Brian Rawson.
Right.
But that transformed the state. But personally, I think it saved lives. I really do feel like it saved lives.
Mark,
I know it
appreciate you
saved
saying
lives.
that.
I know it
Appreciate
did.
you saying that.
See, that's the part of like this. When we say politics, I think we're so wired to all the garbage that's going on about the divisiveness and that stuff. There's so much more meat in the day-to-day. You all are working together and figuring stuff out, and there's a genuineness to these stories that I don't think we hear.
Solving the people's problems. In the final analysis, isn't that, again, getting back to the art of government and politics, that's the lost art. That's sort of what we're supposed to be doing, is solving problems.
It feels very
serving.
sacred to me.
It does.
You know, I mean, I think that's when I hear, and I've heard this from you a lot. We spent a lot of time talking about this. If that feels very sacred to me, but it's not the picture. Like the moment I said politics on anything, people are like, "You're gonna what?" Because we're so conditioned now to just the visceral argument, in the back and forth. So. I would love to also, I know that this is part of that. You say a lot of people hated Brian in the midst of that thing.
Use that term rather loosely.
All right. What would you guys say for you both personally, or that you publicly and privately would be like your biggest misstep in government or in those things? I mean, I've been a pastor for 20-something years, and I'm still messing stuff up. But there's been a couple moments I'm like, oh, that was bad. Like you look back on it. Do you guys have those things that?
Yeah, I think I do. I mean, that's a great question, and requires some self-reflection, Aaron. I think for me, probably, and I don't know that it would be a failure necessarily, maybe a disappointment is, as you start making waves in government, certainly on the executive branch, and you start getting some recognition and you start elevating into roles that are really meaningful public service roles, you shouldn't take every position that's offered. Sometimes, whether it's, you may not have the right attributes, may not be equipped, or maybe the job is set up to fail.
Right.
With the political pendulums that continue to swing. There was more than one job, and I'll speak just in a general sense, that I probably took out of a favor, let's say, to an elected official, or, maybe my own pride. And
Right.
I look at that sort of thing very closely now in the kind of roles that I do. But maybe taking roles that again, you may not be the right person for the
Right.
role, or the politics of the situation or the dominoes may not all be in alignment. Taking those kind of roles and thinking that you can
Right.
manhandle the role in a very, very complicated environment, for me is probably, I think had I had the wisdom then that I have now,
Yeah.
to be very, very selective of those things that you'll really fall on your sword
For sure.
I would have probably been a better public servant,
Yeah.
probably a better leader.
Yeah, that's interesting. How about
Yeah.
you, Mark?
Oh, gosh. Well, this conversation is kind of becoming the Harvard, which is Brian, and the Harvard on the highway, which is me. Because most of my stuff, my biggest mistakes, I think, were made on the political side of thing, which is when you dumb down all these complex public policy issues that he is talking about.
Yeah.
But I think that it's very personal, and I thought I was making the right decision when the time came in an election in 1988 when Ronald Reagan was leaving office. And I went to work for my boss, who was the front runner at the time, was a congressman. He did not win, and I was going against the favorite son, George H.W. Bush, of my home state. And I couldn't get a job anywhere. And I finally got a job working for the National Endowment for Democracy, which ended up being the best thing that I've ever done. But the job was in Novosibirsk, Siberia. And I arrived. I won't tell you that whole story, but the day I arrived, it was, let me convert to Fahrenheit, basically, I think 29 degrees below zero. And I worked there supervising free elections. But if for a American politico to get sent to Siberia, you have screwed up. But it was a good experience. And I think the thing is, I think Brian will attest to this. I think my greatest successes are my happiest times, which you can do in the political world, in the public policy world, what you can't do is sometimes in corporate America, is your mistakes become your assets.
Yeah.
They always
No
do.
doubt.
That's a great life
We
lesson. I
may
think.
not recognize it at the time,
Yeah,
right.
Mark.
Yeah, because
But
it
they do in
changes so fast.
retrospect.
For sure.
I agree with that.
My dad rode me like crazy. He said, when I went into politics, and prior to that I was a CPA, but he kept thinking I was going to go back into this. But he used to always say, you've had 16 jobs in 3 years. No one's going to ever hire you. But
your
in
resume is
politics,
the
that's a
start-
good thing.
That's a good deal. So tell me, for both of you guys, because I think this is where I wrestle. I get so, like, as being a pastor at Riverbend and missions pastor particularly, I get a lot of people back to that kind of the sticker idea where they'll get something that's like, this is our deal. I mean, I get it from both sides, right? About, hey, we got to do this thing. And they'll be emailing me like, it's got to be this thing. And it's a lot of people kind of slapping the Jesus sticker on their thing. And I get it from both sides. I mean, if both those sides could actually see the emails they're sending me, they would be like, it's the same thing with different issues. It's really interesting, which is always kind of a difficult place for me. But I think for you guys who've worked in public service, like how do you begin to really wrestle out your faith with your political affiliation? You know, whether you have one or not. You know, I think both of you tried to stay a little bit more ambiguous, but I'm sure you lean.
We've been trained.
Well, yeah, you've
We
been
have.
trained, but I'm sure you, in your personal life, lean one way or the other. Which I don't know if that affects what's going on. But how have you been able to blend your faith and your politics, or see other people do it too? Because I think that's where a lot of us are struggling and wrestling through. Like, and I look to you guys because you guys have been right in the thick of this thing for a long time, wrestling those things out. So I'd love to hear from both of you how that goes for you.
You want me to start off, Mark, or do you want
Yeah,
to?
you're the minister. I'll get us back to the gutter.
The question's a good one. So I guess kind of hearkening back to my days immersed in the public sector. I'll start off with just a quick story. So I was having coffee, and I'd been in state government in a variety of leadership roles for about a quarter of a century, about 25 years. And I remember sitting down with a lobbyist one time, and a guy that I'd known probably for the majority of my time in state government. And, he told me as we were walking, he was trying to get some information out of me. And he told me as we were leaving the coffee shop that morning, he said, Brian, what I really admire about you as compared to a lot of public officials is, he said, I've known you for almost a quarter of a century, and I have no idea what your political affiliation is. And so I heard many times that I was sort of, I don't know the term, I'll compare myself to an organism, like amoebic. I think I was somewhat amoebic in that environment. What I really worked hard in doing, and I don't think you see enough of it today, is, again, focusing on serving to the best of your ability and not allowing the optics of politics and the political wins. And again, it's much easier for me to do that because I was on the executive side of things, or the executive branch, but not being swayed to the best of your ability by the politics, simply serving. And so it was sort of, for me, a badge of honor not to be recognized as a partisan person.
Right.
There's danger in that, but there's also advantages. For me, I think, not being driven by that to the best, and you are going to be driven by it because you work for elected officials, but really focusing on serving maybe, and so not to insinuate I didn't have political ideology or
Right.
beliefs, but I didn't wrap myself how I serve the public in those beliefs. I just served the best that I could.
Yeah.
Sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't.
So how many people like that? I love that, and I think you give me hope when I hear you say that. What is the majority of people who are doing that in public service, or is it start with the political and then the serving? Because to me, it feels like often it's like, this is my agenda, this is my thing, this is my group,
Yeah.
whatever else it
Yeah.
is, and then I'm gonna pack on the serving and the other thing just to get the vote.
Yeah.
And I could be wrong. That could just be all smoke and mirrors in that.
Mm-hmm.
But were you in the norm?
Yes. I think
Brian would be the norm of,
Yeah.
of political.
during those times, I left state government in 2013. I do think clearly it's become more polarized now. To what degree? I'd actually check probably to Mark on that
No, I'm
because he's
dying to
had some
get in
more
here on
recent
this.
experience.
Yeah.
Let me just say one thing, and as an example. So we did the state did a branding exercise years ago, and this was probably around 2010. Mark probably remembers it. And the brand for Texas at the time was "We're open for business." And that was a brand that, as an agency I had to carry, and we marketed that brand and whatnot. And in retrospect, I have to tell you, it always bugged me because I didn't feel like as a government official, I wasn't here to open business.
Yeah.
I was here to serve the public.
Right.
So we are, we're tasked sometimes with marching, even on the executive side, marching that drumbeat, whether we're, whether we agree with it or not. So,
Yeah. What do you
Mark,
think,
I'd love
Mark?
to hear.
Yeah.
I remember that during the time you came out with that branding thing. Those of you who watched the TV series Yellowstone, if you didn't watch lockstep with everyone on that open for business, you got a real brand.
Absolutely. That's a
Texas
fact.
brand, huh?
That's a fact.
I want to make because I really do believe this. And you've been away from state government for a while, and so have I for 7 months now. But I see things so differently. I really do believe what is hurting our reputation has nothing to do with the work we're doing in both Washington and Austin, but especially in Austin, because entertainment news, which is not news on the far left and the far right, seems to be dictating a lot of stuff. And same thing with the very limited fringe we have both on the far right and the far left in state government, for sure, have no real power. It's the mainstreams in both parties that come together and do what Bob Bullock always said, do what's best for Texas. And just a real quick story. 2 years ago, I started getting calls from friends all around the state, all around the country, not from Texas. Oh, God, we heard what happened yesterday. Are you okay, et cetera, et cetera. At the Capitol, I said, what happened? I said, all those gun nuts showed up. And I said, I was in the Capitol all day long. And they said, well, that was just a starter for what's supposed to happen today. So I hadn't seen anything. I walked into the Capitol, and there was maybe 5 or 6 people who were advocating complete open to carry, no laws at all regarding carrying guns, any type of gun. Maybe 5 people. I walk into a senator's office and look on TV, and there's the Today Show running that story. It looked like a whole group of maniacs
And taking
on the
over
lawns
Capitol.
at the Texas Capitol. And it turned out that was one of the best days I ever had, because the House and the Senate, Republicans and Democrats, put together all differences and came together on a water bill and a revolutionary crime bill against sex offenders on the same day. And so
That's
you
the art
get
of the
what's
possible.
going in,
Yes.
what you see is going in and happening inside. But the people that grab the microphones have nothing else to do. These guys you see on all the TV shows right now, which again I consider entertainment news. I had to quit watching all news during this thing, 'cause this presidential, because it's making me so crazy. The guys, the elected officials that grab the mics on these things don't have anything to do, because the people that are in there working for the good of the country or the state are working 15, 18 hours a day, and these guys don't do anything but throw grenades, and they're outside creating this sort of entertainment rip. You ask about prayer.
Yeah.
I think that was the original question.
Well, even prayer, or even that's your faith. And that could be people from. I mean, even the Christianity, we have different kind of flavors of how we mix our faith in this. Some people will see politically, it's like this is a part of our stance, this is a part of our deal, and other times it's a little bit more, reserved, but it's there. I'm interested in the nuts and bolts about how you guys have faith, because honestly, like right now, in just a little time we've talked, you give a different picture and a different narrative about what
It's entirely
most
different.
of us think about the
That's-
political system, and in our little show that may be revolutionary, but I'm really interested in how you, because it seems like and maybe this is my fault. It seems we are so divided. That how do you intermix your faith and all that?
Well,
kinds of
okay,
stuff?
the elected officials aside, there's no doubt our country is extremely divided right now. But I think it's going to change after Election Day, because the voters will win. When you have 95% of the people vote, you have to say the process worked. So many people were angry after the last election. They were mostly angry at themselves because they believed some polls that had Hillary Clinton leading by 20%, and they just didn't vote. I guarantee you they're voting now.
Yeah.
But so is the other side. We don't know how this election is going to turn out. But my point is, I'm involved in 5 different prayer groups right now. When you cut out TV, you have a lot of time to pray. But
PSA to
we
everybody, right?
spend, and I would normally be on a call right now that they're not in their prayer group. They're watching or listening. But you met Alawa. You heard her pray. It's her prayer group. I'm the only man in the group, and I'm the only white man in the group. And I reached out to them. First of all, they're incredible people, just to find out. And the goal is to pray for the country. That's all we do. And there's no sides to it. There's no right or left. It's just that a lot of these are refugees from the Ivory Coast, and they know what it's like to have a dominant government.
Right.
And they are praying for this country because of what the country does in roles all around the world. What she said, they say without America, this world would be entirely different. But every group I'm with is praying for America right now. And I think that's great. And we all know, as Christians, that prayer wins out. They're not praying for who wins. They're not praying for who loses. They are praying for this country. And I see that. And in my politics, and I've always been a Christian, I've always sought out different prayer groups and within both capitals. But I really do feel like Americans are praying for America right now, and we know the power of prayer.
Sure. So I think that's really. So there's a scripture in Mark 12 that to be honest with you, I mean, Brian's been one of the people that's probably influenced me more than all of this. I've been fairly I don't want to touch politics because it's been so, it feels so abusive.
We know.
I mean, you guys know because you've had to deal with that on all the different levels. But I've had such a Mark 12, the Pharisees are trying to basically arrest Jesus, trying to trap him, and he says, "Hey," they're asking him about taxes, which government taxes is going to be an issue, and so they ask him about this, and he says, "Hey, give me a coin." So whose picture's on that? It says Caesar. He says, "Well, give to Caesar what's Caesar's." And give to God what's God's. And I think there's a lot, maybe especially my generation, maybe not, maybe other generations too, maybe people online. If you're just joining us, we're talking about politics and faith and wrestling this out. But if you're online, tell me if you've struggled with this too. But I've tended to just go, not going to do the political thing. I'm just going to focus on God's stuff. And I think there's been a strong pushback for me, kind of like to say, and I just can't handle the drama. I can't handle the craziness. I mean, when you talked about people not voting, I get it in some levels because all I see is just people yelling at each other. I mean, we don't see this. So I don't know how you guys see it because your life is like, well, we're mixing Caesar and God all into one place, and we see how that works out. But I've been afraid. And I think maybe there's a lot of viewers and other people who are like, man, I'm not mixing. I mean, you don't go to Thanksgiving dinner and talk about politics, right?
No,
I mean,
right
all of you
now.
probably have the same thing.
Let me ask a quick question,
Yeah.
and it's sort of based around this. These stories, I think, are beautiful for a lot of us to hear.
Yeah.
That it's not all flamethrowers and craziness going on behind
Guy
the
has a trident.
scenes. Yeah. So, what's the difference for you guys between unity and uniformity?
That's a great question.
I'll defer to the intellectual first.
And again, this would include your experiences with having to get a bill passed. It would include praying together when it's R's and D's, and maybe some independence in there as whatever else. And just maybe the way you've seen people come together to get something done in service when the media is portraying them as just bitter enemies, but you see unity without everybody being locked, stock, and step with each other, because that's not how we're built. This is not how this country is built.
If you use the term uniformity, that's almost a communist manifesto
Wasn't
where you
gonna
have
say
to
it,
all
but yeah.
march to the exact same step. And that's why people were so excited to be voting in Siberia and Latvia when I was over there.
What year was that, by the way? Huh? What year?
1994.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, 1993. yeah, I got to come back after Bush lost.
They let you back in the country.
Yeah, but
Unity and uniformity.
I think though that I've seen there are two classic examples. One that I worked with every day when I was in Washington, D.C., and that's with Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill and President Ronald Reagan. They absolutely, you would have thought they hated each other. And every time they had a big battle, what they would say and what they would call each other, they would meet for a cocktail, and sometimes in a dive bar in Washington, D.C. But I am very encouraged by Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Anthony Scalia, who could not be more polar opposites. But they have shown, and they never compromised their beliefs. They never, well, I'll give this for that. I mean, they stood solid for their beliefs, but they were best friends. And they had dinner together several nights a week. And I think, but never compromised. I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but I think uniformity, and I think this is what when you do find a politician on the, which would be Bob Bullock's worst nightmare, on the far right or the far left that has power, they are wanting complete uniformity. Everybody has to walk to the same step. All bills have to pass 31-0 in the Senate or whatever. And they don't last very long, but that you don't get good public policy when that happens. You want people that are they want the same thing, but they come in from opposite directions, and you do a lot of give and take, and somehow, Brian, good public policy comes out of that.
Amen. Yeah, your question, Kevin, is a good one, and I'm just sitting here contemplating as Mark talked about in my mind, and this gets into good, policy making and good execution. Shouldn't we be finding common ground? I mean, and that's sort of probably an overused metaphor in these days. But shouldn't we be looking for common goals? I mean, it kind of gets back to what we talked about earlier, which is the art of the possible. Well, the art of the possible has to be built on common goals. There's going to be differences in how we achieve the goals, but that there's motherhood and apple pie out there. And let me give you an example. I mean, I was just sitting here thinking, what was one of the most important things Jesus ever told us in John 13:34? He said, "Love one another as I've loved you." I mean, when we think about, and again, Aaron and I talk about Micah 6:8, acting justly, loving mercy. I mean, those are we can apply those principles. I'm all for the separation of church and state, but we can apply those principles. If we love mercy, Republicans and Democrats, then the issue is how we get from point A to point B. We all believe in mercy. We all believe in treating someone the way that we want to be treated. So there's just some amazing principles, and I think if we focused on the goal, we're going to see that unity. It's only natural.
I agree.
I don't know, Mark, does that?
Absolutely. But, Bob Bullock probably hasn't been talked this much in a long time.
I was just
obviously
gonna
both
say.
have huge respect for him. But he used to say, every time I get ready to quote him, I have to remind myself I'm in church. But he said he didn't.
You're not in church.
You're not in church, in the studio.
You're safe here.
There's a big R for River Bend right above my head. Care. He didn't care. Whether who
Give
won.
us something maybe
It
instead?
was not the Republicans. He said, I don't want a Republican bill. I don't want a Democrat bill. I don't want a conservative bill or a liberal bill where people can say, hey, the conservatives won. Hey, the liberals won. I want what's best for Texas. Period.
Or I want a good bill.
And how many times did we stay up till 3 and 4 in the morning till he was satisfied? And y'all can do better. Y'all can do better. And but I think that's.
So the art of the negotiation wasn't on the goal; it was how to achieve that in a bipartisan way.
Yeah.
That's what was special.
Yeah.
So do you guys see it's got? I mean, I don't know if it's gotten worse or if we just have more cameras.
Well, I think, as I said earlier, it's the public perception is
Yeah.
its worst.
Yeah.
But I walk in that state capitol, and to me, that's the greatest place in the world to be, because you had all these great men and women working hard and passionate, doing good things. But you walk out and watch the news, and it looked like a food fight.
Right.
I'm going to augment also the news, and you've sort of castigated the news, and I agree
Sorry.
with you. No, I agree, but I'll add one more. I can't believe we've gotten this far in a political discussion without mentioning social media.
Right.
Oh,
Well, I was
And-
actually
and
going to bring
so-
up both of these
so,
things.
So
Yeah,
I'd love to
that's
talk
great.
about it. And so to use Mark's example, I think it's a good one. You know, social media, we are rewarded for being on the fringes, right? I say we collectively, but folks are rewarded from being on the fringes. So that's all you see on social media. And so to me, just like the news, we're driving moderates, if you will, independents, those that are really in the middle of the spectrum, may have some progressive policy, may have some conservative policy. We're being driven out that way
Absolutely.
by
Yeah.
social media and
There's-
news.
There's a book called This Town by Mark Leibovich. And in that book, he talks a lot about what we've already covered, that what happens in the capitals, whether federal or state, is on, with the media, it looks like it's just all hell breaking loose. But what's happening behind the scenes is they're praying together, they're having lunch together, they're having drinks together, their kids go to school together, they see each other at the grocery store and all these other things. But he also goes on to point out, and a few other people have pointed this out as well, that we have this heightened 24/7 news cycle where, in addition to social media, where just about anybody can be a pundit now.
Yeah.
Anybody can be a pundit.
Right.
We can sit here and we can start a news show right now where we just talk both sides of it and we try to get viewers and attention and everything else. And there's no question that what we can personally do with our social media has gotten out of control as well, depending on how you look at things. I have a question for you. Do you think people have lost faith and or trust more in media or politicians? Or can you distinguish them?
Yeah, they all one and the same to you.
Well, your questions. I think that I have this huge faith in Americans and Texans. And I think they're going to figure this out this election. I really do. I think they're all seeing over and over that the media, who has guided so much of this polarization, I'm not the only one who's turned off my TV this campaign season.
No, I'm with you, dude. I'm right
And I
there.
think that people are just saying, this is our country.
Yeah.
We are going to vote our conscience, and that's why we see 90% of the people voting. And like I say, they're taking charge of their country. And when you get to the 30s and 40% vote turnout, which I've seen many times, that's when that was a bunch of disenchanted people. Because
Just checking out.
yeah, they just
checking
it
out.
doesn't bother. It just encourages them. I don't like anything. All the politicians are scum. But I really do feel like we're this divisiveness we've had in this country of a lot of really angry people and a lot of people stirring a pot who got a lot more credit than they should.
But real quick, Mark, just let me ask you again. In your opinion, has the general public lost faith and or trust more in politicians or the media? You might say both, or is there another part of this?
Well, again, I have to say, I think they have not lost faith in their power in a democracy. Or 95% of the people would not be standing outside like I did this morning for over an hour to vote, and that's happening all over this country.
So-
they believe in the process. But there was a time, and there is a they're doing this because they are really disenchanted. It's both. They're really disenchanted with the political extremes that they see that have been made stars by the entertainment media. These are not the Walter Cronkite type media that we
Yes.
all grew up with.
Yes, and it's interesting you say that, and I'll get back to you in just a second.
I still haven't answered your question. I'm
But
sorry.
that's okay. One of the
I think
things
I'm Brian.
one of the things Leibovich says is we're missing a Tim Russert or a Walter Cronkite.
Yeah.
I guess Tim Russert was the last guy that we all kind of felt like he just really could be down the middle, and both sides of the aisle felt like that's a good guy.
Well, and that's why, the numbers, I watched this, the numbers of people who are watching these news shows, whether it's the Today Show or Good Morning America or anything on Fox or MSNBC or you name it, are dropping like crazy. And they are turning, Brian, like me. I'm getting news. Believe me, don't worry. I've got my pulse on everything. But I have gone through all the social media and I said, well, this guy seems really fair because I know what's happening behind the scenes. Or this report or this institution really tries to promote both sides of the issue. Some of them are fairly big publications, maybe the Wall Street Journal. Sometimes they get it wrong, but they're doing a pretty good job. And so social media is offering the alternative, and that's where people are turning. They're getting their news, but not from these shows,
I
or
wanna
their
get to
numbers
that.
wouldn't be dropping so badly.
I want to get to that in a second. I think Brian's chomping at the
Man,
bit.
I'm glad Mark went first because I really had to articulate a reaction here. I think they're inextricably tied.
Wow.
And here's what I mean
Wow.
by that. I don't think you're going to have, and I love Mark's term, entertainment media, to the degree that we have if someone's not consuming it. So here's the thing. I mean,
Or feeding it.
or feeding it and consuming it. Right. That's
Because
right.
you need a willing participant that's going to get in front of the mic, I guess. Not always. You can still be a pundit. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
You know, we have become a society of conspiracy theory.
Oh, yeah.
And again, that's tied to the fringes we were speaking to earlier. We love a good conspiracy theory. We thrive
Like a
on-
drama or a narrative.
And so, you know, our news cycles, our entertainment news cycles are feeding that voracious habit, right? So, I mean, I think the two are inextricably tied. I would go back to this point, though. Thomas Jefferson said something really good about the media way back when. That was a little bit different media back, you know.
A little bit different media.
But, you know, essentially, he felt like it was the fourth leg of a four-legged stool, if that makes sense. Those are Brian's words, not Thomas Jefferson's. But there's, you know, I mean, our forefathers believed that a strong, fact-based, factual media was as important to an American as our
believe
executive, legislative, and judicial branch. So I'm an absolute advocate of fact-based. Who can't? I mean, that's motherhood and apple pie. I'm still looking for fact-based, real media. It's far and few between.
Is there a
days.
cycle of that? Like if you look historically, get back in things like yellow journalism and muckrakers and that kinds of stuff. And if you don't know what that is, there was a time in our history where it was their version of entertainment media. And then you see the ship kind of get right with the Walter Cronkites of the world. Is if you look at the whole of history, I mean, you're going back pretty far when you talk about Thomas Jefferson. You guys being in this political world and seeing, is there an ebb and flow of a balanced thing of this fact media that happens in one way, shape, or form?
Well, I can't find the hero right now in the media. I really can't. Although everybody trusts him. They made it well.
I'm pretty sure it's Aaron Foor and Kevin Hedges on Everything Matters.
At this point,
pretty
I'm
sure.
I'm all into that. I'm all into that.
Everything matters. It's where all your news is like real and it's legit, right? You know?
Wait. We don't do news.
As Mark continues, I want to react to that, though, because can you imagine today if Walter Cronkite were with us, there would be opposition research to
Discredit him.
I mean, I don't know that we'll ever
That's
put
fascinating.
that genie back in the bottle. Who is credible? I mean, when PolitiFact, which used to be a bipartisan, viewed as a bipartisan, truth-seeking organization, is viewed as either hyper-liberal,
Fascinating.
hyper-progressive, or hyper-conservative. I mean, how are we ever going to have an anchor, a credible news anchor that, you know, somebody's not going to dig up some Oppo research when he was 9 years old, you know? And I hate to be a defeatist on that, but we're in a different place right now.
A few comments here real quick. First of all, John Harrell is watching, and he is commenting, and he's enjoying it. I just want to let you know he's really enjoying everything. I
Then we're
believe
in
this
trouble.
is McAllister Southern.
McAllister.
I
what's
think
up?
she's saying there's a great, usually I don't use last names. Sorry, McAllister. My bad. There's a great documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma, and it does a great job in describing
we're
and
gonna
showing
get
how
this.
we get this polarized state and where social media drives that. I've watched that show. I think we recommended it a couple of weeks
We've
ago.
talked about it a few times. If you haven't watched
If you've not
Social
seen it.
Dilemma, it is totally worth it because I think what it does, I think we start to get into the psychology about what we believe and how we get influenced by those things,
Yeah.
specifically through the media, but now more and more social media and how you can go to these rabbit holes and just that's all you see and and it's become so divisive. I mean, they really connect it to other places in the world that have used these same tactics to just really divide people. So, I guess for me, like if you're going so divided and you're putting your Jesus sticker on whatever that rabbit hole is, man, how does that affect us at the church level and at the community level? Because it feels to me like people are like, and maybe maybe it wasn't that 20 years ago, and maybe I'm wrong on that, but it just feels like, man, everybody's on the edge because of these types of divisiveness and things. Yeah. And when you slap the Jesus sticker on it, it's like,
Here we
now
go.
what do we do? Because now we've just made it like the God's on my side about whatever these things are. So
again, that's the extremes we're talking about.
Yeah.
I see people praying all the time, and I talked to a guy, one of the most powerful persons in the state, a few weeks ago.
Wait, I thought that was Brian Rawson.
Yeah,
what we
sorry about
okay,
that.
okay, not Brian.
In
Somebody
fact,
else.
But he said, and I was really stressed. He said, "I think only God can save this country right now." And so the things you were talking about, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, Jesus won.
Jesus won.
I mean, I think that we have got to see. But I can't stand the extreme religious people that get on TV, and I mean, again, they're just like the extremes and on the consultants and just extreme elected officials. You never see them at the inner circle. I mean, I hate it because I'm trying to get people to love the Lord like I do, and they refer to Jerry Falwell or somebody like that. I guess I shouldn't mention names, but but we see that, and but again, it's those extremes. I mean, I want to make one last point about this, but when I was watching the news stuff, there's not a political consultant in this country that's good that I don't know. I never see them on these programs, and I know anybody who is making a difference in public policy at the state and the national level. You don't see them on these programs either. They get these grenade throwers that will say anything to be on TV.
Wow. So you referenced a little bit Pharisees and Sadducees because I had a little write-up that we went, and I think for me this says something to your point, is that in the first century, in time when Jesus was walking the earth, you had four political groups. You had the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes, and the Zealots. And if you look at Jesus' 12 disciples, those groups are represented within the 12 disciples. And so I've often wondered what subliminal thing the Savior of the world is saying to us about our political affiliations and those types of things, because he didn't say I have all Pharisees or I have all Sadducees or I have all Essenes or Zealots. It's like I got all four that were the major.
And let's throw in Alan Hilton's point that he made in his devotional last week. Alan spoke this last Sunday, and he's on the show.
Go watch it. It's awesome.
Go watch it. But Alan's one of his devotions during this political time, leading up to the elections, included Simon the Zealot with Matthew the tax collector. So we've got a guy that's working for the government as well, doing something people hate, which is collecting taxes. So this is a wide diversity of people. It's a great glimpse into how these things work.
It really is.
From the Jesus model, that is.
For sure. So in that idea and model, and I'm not asking to out you guys on your political party or version, but if you were to speak to your political party about what you think would help bring unity, what would be you guys are, Mark, you're at a national and state level knowing some guys, both of you. I mean, I've loved hearing this stuff, but what if you're advising that if you're talking to the top advisor of whatever political party that you affiliate with or connect with, what would you say to them to bring unity?
Do you want me to answer that?
Go ahead.
I mean,
I'll be happy to.
I can't wait to hear what you have to say. But be extremely brief. I think, and I talk to these mainstreamers, Republicans, Democrats, all the time.
Yeah.
Say, you need to call out these other people, but you're so afraid that you're going to alienate a
base.
segment of your party
Yeah.
that you don't do it. And you cannot let them dictate this. They're always going to be against you. They're always going to come out with a far left candidate to run against a mainstream or a far right candidate to run against a mainstream. But you can't. I think we've lost from the election side people that are willing to just take a stand and call people out and do what they need to do because they're afraid of the next election. And we've gone to a full-time election process now,
Yeah.
which makes it hard.
So, if I were to provide advice, there has to be an assumption that somebody's listening to the advice. I'm not sure that I would.
You've been doing this for a while, haven't you?
So to kind of carry forward my reputation in state government, which was I was somewhat amoebic, I'll kind of walk the middle road here, and I am politically speaking moderate. But I'd give advice to the right and the left. And on the right, what I would say is we have to stop trying to shoehorn Jesus into fitting this personal political ideology. I got a good friend that's in the Bridge program. All three of us know a good friend of mine in our Bridge program down in South Austin that says, we got a big old God. I love it when he says that. You guys know what I'm talking about. He says, we got a big old God. I think we shortchange that God when, for political purposes, we have to shoehorn him into a divisive or a fringe issue
So good.
every time we get a chance. So I think that's, for my friends on the right, I would say we gotta think our God. We have to know our God is bigger than trying to shoehorn him in to a divisive political issue. But likewise on the left, what I'd love to see with our progressives, and quite frankly, I see it on our moderate progressives, but not on the fringe, is maybe we need to start considering the teachings of Jesus a little more on the left, right? And not to insinuate, I think there's a tremendous number of believers on the left. I don't know that they necessarily get recognized for it, but I would like to see, especially on the fringes, whether we're talking about believers or not, folks taking the advice and looking at the teachings of Jesus Christ as being the hands and feet of Christ. That's what we do here at Riverbend, and that's what we do on our streets. So
Does that come from your serving part that you started with?
it does.
I mean, is that built into you from the beginning, this serving
I've
thing?
often said, and I didn't realize Mark had tuned out as much as he has to entertainment news, and I love it. But, I think about this regularly when we're on the streets here in Austin. If folks would spend less time on entertainment news and on this divisive social media platform and more time just out in our community, serving as the hands and feet of Christ.
We got some space to help let you do that, right?
Right. Hey,
plug for
I'm
that.
plugging here. But loving one another as Jesus loved us and thinking about that, having that consume our thoughts as opposed to who can, what political operative we can follow for the day.
Right.
I think we'd be in a little bit better shape.
That's interesting. What do you think about that, Mark?
When Brian talks like that, all I can say is I agree.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
And I think we're spending way too much time calling out our brothers and sisters
Amen.
on political things and getting outraged over what we've heard in the news and take that, and then it affects every aspect of your life. Again, as I said earlier, I really do think the voters are going to take back this country. And I think if it works the way I think it is, no matter who comes out on top, we are going to see unity. People are saying anarchy. I'm thinking the voters are going to say, hey, who on either side can deny that many people voting and someone coming out on top? I wish we would get to a point where, you can say, I don't even know how many people, 20 million people are going to vote one way and their candidate won, and 19,500,000 voted another way, their candidate lost. there are no losers in that if
Amen.
it's played right. I was involved when Nelson Mandela won in South Africa. I was not in
Wow.
South Africa, but I was very involved in that race. And I thought one of the most interesting things about that was he beat de Klerk, who was the prime
F.W.
minister
de
at the
Klerk,
time
Yeah.
during apartheid when it was all white. Well, it was a relatively close election, but everyone knew that Nelson Mandela was going to win, and so did de Klerk. But they both served together because, de Klerk, in our race, whoever comes out on top, the loser's going to go away, not to be heard from very much, and it's a winner take all. Over there, de Klerk was very involved in government, doing what was best and help. And Nelson Mandela spoke very highly of what he did to help unify the country and come up with good public policy. He said it's not about social issues that he's working about. He worked with the infrastructure, highways, and things like that. I wish we had more of that, but we don't. But again,
Gets
I
back to the
believe in
unity
voters.
that Kevin was
Yeah,
talking about. I agree.
You actually answered. I was going to ask you guys a couple questions as we get ready to wrap up here, and one of them was your biggest hope and your biggest fear. I think we heard your biggest hope, which is you have this hope that people are going to come out and vote, and the will of the people will be heard, and that's a good thing. That's the way the government works. But maybe tag on. We'll go to you, Brian, too. Biggest fear.
Well, the biggest fear is if it doesn't work. And the biggest fear is we let extremes take over again with riots or with
Use the word
Ku Klux
anarchy.
Klan rallies and things like that
Yeah.
that don't speak for the world. I think you're going to have, I think that all of us, whether we're on your program or whether you're running for President of the United States or the Senate or anywhere, has got to talk unity. Our country can't survive with this type of
feel that.
divisiveness,
Yeah.
and I think only God can save us. But that's my biggest fear, is that we will go to the extremes that we control in the news again, and I don't think that's going to happen. I pray for it. I don't think the voters want that. I think if their voice is heard. And they voted. I think a lot of the anger came from, and I was teaching a class at the LBJ school right after the election, one of the highest public policy institutions, most respected in the country. And most of my students, they were so angry after that election. And when I called them all out, most of them didn't even vote. And so usually when somebody's really mad, they're mad at themselves. I think that's what started it. They're voting this time, so they can't be mad at themselves.
Right.
Brian, same thing.
Yeah,
Greatest
so
hope,
it's
greatest
very
fear.
similar to Mark's. So fear I won't talk much about, because fear, like Mark's, is that we continue to just exacerbate this divisiveness that we see. I don't think that's going to happen. So here that really plays into the hope. Unity, and let's talk about the idea of unity, as Mark just did. In this country, so many times has happened after great crises and after great division. We've seen it time and time again. It's played out repeatedly in well over 200 years. When we see on the streets of Austin, Texas, I'm going to get back to the unsolicited testimonial here.
Love it.
During the darkest days that we've seen in this community in a long time, certainly in my lifetime, 58 years in this community, in the midst of this darkness, and I'm talking about the pandemic, on top of the political divisiveness that's occurring, just the darkness that exists, we are seeing so much hope on the streets of Austin. And that's not an infomercial. That's from being out there, and all of us have been out there over the last many months, seeing, the last thing we talk about in the field on the streets of Austin is political affiliation. We get away from social media, we get away from Mark's great coin term, entertainment news, and we get back to loving people and serving people that need to see us and need to understand what the hands and feet of Christ are all about. So there's great hope in this community right now. We see it.
It's great hope in this country.
Absolutely. And I think that absolutely applies to the rest of the country.
Yeah, I love that. I appreciate you guys so much sharing. You both of you give me hope, and I don't see a lot, and that's why it was fun for us to kind of do this. I don't see a lot of this, of what goes on behind the scenes, I guess, and it gives me a lot of hope. I hope it does other people. You know, as Brian, as you're talking about it, some of these working together towards a goal. One of the things that I think I'm most proud of as a pastor was I lived in a place called Big Bear, California. It was a ski resort, you know that where. And my Big Bear friends are watching. We love you. I love that.
Hard life.
Yeah, I was snowboarding a lot and wakeboarding snowboarding in the winter, wakeboarding in the summer. It's great, but we had kids in our town who skateboard a lot, and they had a place to go to get kicked out of the banks, whatever else. So we put.
Banks are where they skateboarded. Okay.
You shouldn't be skating in a bank.
Leave.
Skate or
Don't
die,
steal
right?
money.
So we put rails and other stuff out from the skate at the church because I never wanted them to feel like they didn't have a place to go. Like, and I knew at some point they're going to grow up and be like, they're going to be policemen and firemen and state officials. And I wanted them to look at the church and say, that place, instead of saying that place kicked me out from skating, that they loved me and welcomed me at some level, right? So that kind of thing within my church and with my community turned into, well, we have land. That we wanted to have some sort of skate park, so the city, Big Bear City, said they'd help fund some of this to build a skate park. We had the land, and then the county of San Bernardino ended up saying we'll cover the insurance on the thing. We leased this piece of land that was our property for $1 a year for 20 years.
Love it.
And we built a skate
great.
park on our
Love
property
it.
at church. Now, people are like, how in the world did you have a city, a county group, and a church work together on a project? And it was the large part because my friend Reese Treblefield, he worked at the Parks and Rec in San Bernardino County, and he made it happen. But he chose in a very, very political position to say, I'm going to bring people together. I'm going to have unity. And it
But
was
the
all
common
for
denominator
kids.
in that was the church.
Well,
Because we see that, Brian and I see that all the time with all these
Absolutely.
kids. The church is much more powerful in this than we will ever know.
Have
and
you
that's
ever
why our
heard-
prayers
And we're
are so
seeing that
important.
here right
you ever
now,
heard-
that exact dynamic.
You ever heard the phrase, probably not in the halls of the Capitol, where the church succeeds, the state recedes? You ever heard that?
Probably not.
But it's true. It's a great one.
I don't know. I heard it a while ago.
Well, Mark, what we did in that, like, kind of our marketing was like, well, we all care about kids. Like, and it was kind of the type of thing,
Find
if
the
you
common denominator.
if you wanted to be against it, it was like, so
But
are you against kids? We kind of had them, because
Mother's
like,
apple pie.
who's the
Yeah.
horrible person going to
But
say,
the bank didn't
Get
say
'em out of the
that.
banks.
City
Get 'em out of the
council
banks.
didn't say
They
that.
all-
The church said
We
it.
did. We
And
did.
that's why I think the church, I think we overlook so much the important role that the church plays
Right, Mark.
in our public policy arena right now.
You're
And
right, Mark.
Our church and our prayers are what are going to rescue us.
Amen.
That's really, really good.
Thank you, by the way, for Sam and Bev Vall. They've got a great reminder about Matthew 25, which is what you've done for the least of these you've done for me. It's good to revisit that.
It's on a mural on our South Austin Neighborhood Development
South
Center.
Austin.
That's right. I
Yes.
knew I'd say, yeah.
Thank you,
Amen.
Sam and
Thank you,
Bev. And
Sam.
John, thanks for hanging in there. He reminds us that no matter what happens with the election, God's not going to be surprised.
That's right.
And MCA South,
MCA South.
McAllister.
Come on, MCA.
She's
MCA.
saying It's
MCA
called
in the house.
leadership. So thank you guys for hanging with us tonight online.
Thank you guys. I just want to say again, thanks for being here, for being part of it.
What a joy.
I hope and I do pray for unity in our country. And politics has been so divisive. Man, wouldn't it be great to see people from all over say, hey, we're going to be together and we're going to be one. And I dream of that. I really, really do. So thank you guys for being here tonight. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, Aaron.
Carlton's going to be back tomorrow night.
Actually, he's not. No.
No?
Carlton is on a much, much needed vacation right now. So he will
Carlton's
not be here
chilling.
tonight.
Okay.
Tomorrow night on Him Sing.
Then join us next week. We'll have Immerse here at the same time, and we'll have services this weekend. So come hang with us. Thanks for being with us tonight. We will see you guys soon.